Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you become an age hacker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we help you live young for a lifetime? I'm Steve Ryder, and Dr. Gladden, this is a special episode because this is your 200th episode, dating back to when it was originally started as a Living Beyond 120, and then it morphed into Gladden Longevity Podcast.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Gladden, I want to say congratulations because I found you in 2017 or 2018, and I listened to every episode, and so this is cool, man, for you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Steve. It's been quite a journey, quite honestly. We've learned a lot. And, you know, I remember back when I was racing cars, I always had an aspiration to hit 200, and I never quite got there. So this is kind of like a surrogate marker for me. I'm getting the same adrenaline rush. So, yeah, it's good to be here.
So I guess my first thought for you, and we'll introduce our guests in a minute, but my first thought for you is, what has been an overarching thing that you've learned or theme that you've found throughout all these 200 episodes now?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So I think in many respects, it's kind of what have I been surprised by?
Yeah.
Right? What have I really been surprised by? So, you know, we knew that diet, nutrition, things like that were going to be helpful. I think as I've gone through this and gone through the history of Gladden Longevity, some of the biggest surprises are just how incredibly important mindset is.
Ooh,
it seems to trump almost everything. And the deeper I go into it with every client, having the right mindset, asking the right questions, not being married to your current answers. I see it over and over again. I just had a chance to speak at RADFest, and it was really interesting to talk to a number of the other practitioners there, and other technology people and physicians and other folks like that. And everybody is really kind of fixated on a particular thing that they're doing. And it just reminds me that they develop an answer, and it's a good answer, right? It may be a good answer. But they tend to get married to that answer, and everything now revolves around, you know, everything's about nitric oxide, everything's about glutathione, everything's about stem cells, you know, and they kind of focus in and they generate an entire worldview that's centered on that particular technology. And I think what I've learned is that mindset trumps every technology. And what's really, 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 really enabled us to grow and expand and to be told over and over again, there's nobody else like you out there. I hear that all the time. There's nobody else out there like you who's actually integrating all these different pieces, has such an open mindset, able to embrace, integrate, and implement all these different technologies. And what I find is that mindset, when I'm at a meeting like that, what comes forward for me is that these people all have these technologies. Okay, great. We have all those technologies too, but we actually put it into an orchestrated program for an individual, right? And that's such a differentiator. And so many people start to see that when they come up and they hear us talk or whatever. And so I think one of the really surprising things is that other people aren't doing that, right? That their mindset is such that they're focused on the narrow as opposed to embracing the whole. So that's been sort of a surprise. And I think I would have thought that more people would be doing what we're doing, but they're not for whatever reason. So that's been really interesting. I think one of the other really big surprises is the way that layering these different technologies together in an orchestrated fashion builds really amazing results for people.
And
right?
and I've heard you say for some people it's exponential. You have this technology which helps this much, and you have this technology that helps this much. But you combine those together, and it's like it can be a 5-10x
That's right.
fold increase.
That's right. It's a little bit like being the conductor of an orchestra or being the chef, the master chef in the kitchen, right? And so, you know, you can have all the ingredients in the kitchen, right? But how you put that together, it can either taste kind of okay, or it can be a masterpiece. And so I think what we're really dedicated to at Gladden Longevity is actually figuring out those recipes to make it exceptional, to get exceptional results for people. We're not satisfied with, well, you got your stem cells, well, you got your peptides, well, you got your hormones. It's really how do you orchestrate this together to give you maximum benefit across health, performance, longevity, and then how do we measure those things, right? So I think that's been really, really fun and really, really interesting for us.
So give me an example of combining some technologies that you've seen a big bump in terms of the effectiveness of each of those separately.
Yeah. Well, I would say, things like fitness for one, right? Like lots of people are exercising, they're lifting weights or they're doing things. When you start to reframe what exercise is into it's a neuromuscular activity, not a muscle activity, and you start to focus on the nervous system, and then you start to focus on the anaerobic elements of that, the blood flow restriction elements of that, the balancing elements of that, the neurosynaptic reaction times elements of that. And you start to put that together with timing your hormones in relationship to when you're going to do certain workouts and when you're going to block mTOR and when you're going to activate mTOR for anabolic effects. And you start to put that into a rhythmic sort of flow. What's remarkable is that, the last time I had my bone density done a couple months ago, I had better than average bone density for a 30-year-old, right? And so, and my strength has been, is not diminishing, and my muscle mass is not diminishing. And so it's like, those are exceptional results because everybody else around me that's about to turn 70 at their next birthday is not experiencing that, right? They're not experiencing that. So it's the exceptional results that you can get for yourself, but then also for clients. So.
Yeah. Well, we have a regular contributor to this podcast, Dr. Ernie Navarro, your colleague there at Gladden Longevity in the Dallas area. Ernie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's kind of surreal to be here on the 200th episode, honestly, after, 3.5 years now with Dr. Gladden, and just seeing where we are today and, compared to where we started, really kind of almost in the heart of COVID, lockdowns and stuff like that. So just what a different landscape it is now, compared to when I started. And, we've moved buildings, our staff has grown, and it's just pretty amazing to be here and, be on this podcast today with him. And honestly, it's just congratulations, Dr. Gladden, on, what you've accomplished and where we've come and how just to be a part of it. I'm just,
Oh, yeah. No, I appreciate that, Ernie. Ernie came in about, as he said, 3.5 years ago and has really, jumped in with both feet, so to speak. He was already really sold on what we were doing, but to see him really kind of get up to speed and start to push the envelope on things and collaborate together, it's been such a joy for me to, be able to work with somebody like Dr. Navarro. I mean, he's really, really a talented guy. We get along exceptionally well. We're always exchanging ideas and things like this. So, yeah, it's really been a pure pleasure. So
I know that listeners have really appreciated, Ernie, your perspective. Especially, I remember listening to you and Dr. Gladden and the former co-host talk during COVID about some various things. And I remember listening in the car with my parents on the drive over to Milwaukee for a flight back to Colorado. And my parents were devouring all the content as well. So thank you. Thank you for what you bring, not only to this podcast when you come on, Ernie, but to Gladden Longevity.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I think I've mentioned this before. It was a big leap of faith to leave, the ER and do this. But I knew he had something special here at Gladden Longevity. Of course, at the time it was Apex. We're now Gladden Longevity, and I hoped it would turn into something, grow into something big, and it's showing that it is turning into that. So, I think I made the right choice.
Yeah.
So Ernie, over the 3.5 years that you have been at Gladden Longevity and you have listened to the podcast, been on the podcast, what have been some surprises or some things that you've learned?
I mean, it's so much. It's kind of like, drinking through a fire hose, right? So it's just the amount of information. And then once you go, you just go down these rabbit holes. But I think the biggest thing I think I've seen, like how Dr. Gladden mentioned, a lot of people have these kind of like silver bullets for longevity, and they're all really great. But I think combining things, I think we've seen the most incredible results where people, with the timing and kind of just kind of orchestrating the sequence of how we do things. Because sometimes there's health issues that have to be addressed before you can kind of really push on the longevity
Mm-hmm.
side of things. But really understanding that we're a mosaic of ages, which he said that from the very beginning, that's always been Dr. Gladden's kind of thing. So even, as he mentioned, we go to these conferences and like at RadFest and things like that. And there's brilliant people and there's so much to learn from them, which is great. And I love being, in that environment. But, a lot of people, oh, I'm 31, it's like, well, what is that based on? That's maybe one age, but, what's your vascular age? What's your telomere age? What does that age mean? So I think really understanding all your ages, and then you can maybe come up with an average or something, however you want to do it, but not just saying, oh, I'm 20 years younger, because you got to look a little bit further under the hood.
Yeah,
Just that.
exactly. A lot of that's based on either, to your point, Ernie, algorithms that people take some routine blood tests and run them through an algorithm which spits out a biological age. Or in many instances, people are doing DNA methylation testing, right, epigenetic testing, and getting a particular age.
Right.
And now what's interesting is that at RadFest, TrueAge was basically releasing a new testing platform which is designed to try to use DNA methylation to predict what transcriptomics and proteomics would say about the age of 11 different organ systems. So, in essence, when you read their paper, they're basically saying one of the mistakes with DNA methylation testing is that it's been consolidated into a single age. And we understand they didn't use the word mosaic of ages, it's trademarked, but what they ended up saying is that we all know that we're a collection of different ages. And so now
Right.
we're trying to use DNA methylation testing to actually, parse out what are your particular ages around these different organ systems. And what I found is that with DNA methylation testing, it's good, but it's also an estimate. Like when they try to estimate telomere lengths and then we actually measure telomeres, we get two different reports typically, right? Two different results. We get more detail measuring them directly. The same is true when it comes to cardiovascular health. They can give you a DNA methylation sort of heart age or liver age, right? But when you actually go in and you measure the heart and you look at it through 5 or 6 different lenses to get an idea of really how it's working, you come away with a much better sense of what this person's heart age is, or blood vessel age is,
Yeah.
or hormonal age is, or
Right.
bone density is, et cetera. So I really think our approach is, in many respects, being validated by other people trying to come at it through these sort of single test platforms. But in actual fact, for the listener, you should understand that you really have to test across the different modalities to actually get the best test to understand where your brain is, where your bones are, where your heart is. And when you put all those pieces together, then you really get a more comprehensive view. And I will say this, we're working hard every day to do it better also, right? We want to understand it more deeply, right? Which is why the whole LIFE-RAFT index has been developed to try to look behind the curtain, to look at the drivers of aging and longevity and understand those in more detail, right? And we just got IRB approval for our protocol using the LIFE-RAFT index to start using these custom-built peptides to help modulate these drivers of aging and longevity, if you will, back into a youthful expression. And that's super exciting for us. So that trial is opening up now to bring more people in and give them access to be able to use this technology. At the same time, we're currently measuring 8 markers, and we're going to expand it to 12. And because the blood tests have all the original data, the people that did the original testing for 8, when the 12 are developed, they'll get those added onto their reports. It'll just be there for them. So anyway, we're super excited about all this stuff. Yeah.
Super excited about that. And I think also adding on to what you were saying is understanding that like these biological ages that you can do, whether it's DNA methylation or whatever, a lot of them fluctuate, depending on stress, COVID, illness, inflammation. So it's an ongoing effort to maintain them. You can't, join a program for a year, take rapamycin, do a, young plasma exchange, and then just, okay, thanks, and then kind of move on and think you're going to live another decade. That's why, ideally clients that come to us, they're lifelong, because every year it's evolving, and it takes ongoing effort to stay young, honestly, right? To live young for a lifetime. So, addressing things that pop up, got COVID or whatever happened. Okay, let's see how we can, assess the damage and kind of repair, right? And then, hormones are off. I've got a sick relative, the stress, going back to, how important and how powerful the mind and stress is more than anything, really. I've seen that impact. People can be doing fantastic, and then something stressful comes along, and all of a sudden their hormones are off, their thyroid's not working. It will throw everything off, telomeres, you name it. So that really it just shows the importance of, stress management and your mindset too. How you react to stressors in your life is going to make a huge impact on your success in the program, really.
Yeah, I think one of the big surprises for me, Ernie, in this also was I didn't fully realize that aging was actually not just going along a timeline, right? But it's actually going forwards and backwards. Like you're aging more rapidly now to the point you were just making when you get COVID or when you get a vaccine or when you all of a sudden you're aging faster, right?
Right.
Or when you lose a spouse, like I saw.
Or you lose a spouse, or you go through a life event, a divorce, a spouse,
Yes.
a child's death, any of these stressful life events, or lose a job, or anything like that, right? So, or be in lockdown for that matter, right? All the people that aged more rapidly in lockdown with the isolation, right, and the depression and the loss of oxytocin and all these things, right? So aging can definitely be accelerated, but it can be deaccelerated also, and it can be reversed. And so seeing that people where we've reversed their aging have hit a stressor and then accelerated their aging back to where they were, or maybe even deeper, and then we have to pull them out of that again. Yeah. It really is kind of this tug of war with the aging process to stay young. Exactly. So it's an ongoing battle, if you will.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I've noticed is like it's an ongoing battle, really. And then that's why we like to do, at least twice a year, if not more, testing to kind of see, hey, what's going on. A lot of our clients travel, they pick up, parasites or whatever, we test gut extensively. So just anything that could be triggering inflammation or stress on the system is, if you wait too long, it's harder to reverse it. So.
I think one of the other things that we're learning from the LIFE-RAFT index testing that we're doing is that inflammation and oxidative stress, which we've always known biologically are intertwined, right? What's the problem with inflammation? Well, it causes excess oxidative stress at the tissue level. That's why it's damaging. But to see how big of a driver those are in people's aging process, even when they're taking antioxidants, even when they're using the right supplements, even when they're doing all these things, and to see that these processes can supersede the ability of these external forces to actually modulate them, right? I think that's been a surprise too, because you have the idea, well, if I eat a non-inflammatory diet and I take hydrogen, and I take fish oil, and I take SPMs, and I do these things, right, that somehow that's going to bring my inflammation and oxidative stress under control. Okay, well, maybe, but let's test. And when we test, like in my own case, it was like, holy cow, it's not as under control as I want it to be, right? Or I need it to be. And so there's so much power in actually being able to see where you are in the process, rather than just saying, well, here's a healthy thing to do and I'll do it and I'll be okay, right? It's really short-circuiting the whole process. So I think that's been surprising also, is just to see how much is behind the curtain that you really can't see with just routine testing. So,
right.
So for listeners that are relatively new to this podcast, give them an idea of the very foundational things that they should be doing on their own. Should they be thinking about going to Gladden Longevity, or maybe it's just outside of their budget, and so they want some tips on those very, very foundational things that you guys are addressing right away?
Yep. So there's a couple of things. One is people can work with us, right? One of the things that we're going to do a podcast on coming up is actually how to pay for your longevity care, if you will, right? Because everybody faces this. And yes, it is an investment. I just signed up several people this last week. And one of the conversations I had with a guy was, if you send a child to college for a year, what does that cost? And what's the return on that investment, right? Well, they get, 1 year closer to a degree, which may or may not lead to much of anything at that point, right? Whereas if you take that same money and you invest it in your own education, right, of understanding where you are in the aging process, how to go about things, what to do, what's specific to you, what are your assets and your liabilities, the return on investment for that is massive. And you can pay for it pre-tax, right? So there are so many ways to pay for this pre-tax. And so, something that sounds like a lot of money, well, $20,000, that's a lot of money, or $40,000, that's a lot of money. But if you're in a 40% tax bracket, or if you live in California, 50, whatever it is, 2% tax bracket, or you're working for the government out there, and you cut it in half, all of a sudden, that's pretty manageable. And so there are ways to finance it. There are ways to borrow against your 401k, against your life insurance policy, have an HSA set up, different kinds of saving plans and things like that. If you own your own company, there are many ways to take it as a corporate officer, kind of benefit and things like that. So virtually all of our people are paying for this pre-tax. So when people hear the number of what it costs, and you have to understand when they write us a check, we're immediately turning around and are writing checks out the door, right? It's not like all that money's necessarily coming to us by any stretch, right? So nobody's really getting rich off of this, I will tell you that, right? So it's the idea of we're trying to provide the best service possible for people. So anyway, when people understand that, and you can pay for your supplements that way too, right? And your medication. So all of a sudden it's like, yes, it is an investment, but what better investment than investing in your health and staying young? Because the return on that investment over years and decades is massive. Instead of retiring, instead of shutting down, you're starting new companies, you're getting a better job, you get a promotion, you do whatever you're going to do. So I think framing up the investment element of this as really the best investment you can make, financial investment you could possibly make, right? Like when I think back on my own life, what are the best investments I ever made, right? Well, number one has to be my education, right? The checks I wrote, I put myself through medical school, right? I helped pay through part of my college, but the checks I wrote to get an education have been paid back, thousands of times. Then when you think about, the investment that you make in your health like this, that's massive. And then the investment that you make in building companies, right? There's returns on investments there too. So I think as a listener, you should think about the fact that, it's not a question of whether I should do this. It's really a question of how am I going to do this? Because what's the alternative to not doing it, right? You're just going to be in the hands of a sick care system that's basically just going to check mark you as you go down the aging process, right? So I think as people understand that longevity is actually a real thing, that you can live young for a lifetime, they're going to start to think about budgeting for this, just like they would budget for a kid to go to college or, a car they want to buy or whatever it is, right? So, and I think it will change the dialogue in people's minds and in the community around this. So I think that's a super important thing to know. Yeah.
So for those that are working a 9-to-5 job and they're not in a position where they can afford you guys, what would be some of those foundational things
some of the foundational things. So, well, the first thing is getting your stress under control. And, the first thing that we do with most people when they come in is it's not a question of what can we actually do for them. It's what is it that they need to stop doing to themselves.
Ooh,
right?
That's a good one.
Right. Because number one, it's cheap, right? You're drinking less alcohol. You're doing whatever else. You're getting better sleep. So really, it all starts with actually what are you doing to yourself currently, either with stress or habits that basically are not serving you well, and how do you actually orchestrate that back into a more healthy lifestyle? So that's a starting point that everybody can do. And then, of course, the whole life energy circle, right? Having a mindset that's devoted to asking questions and not being committed to certain answers that you have, feeling love, feeling safe, developing wisdom, developing a spiritual connection, starting to feel like you're really aligned with a purpose here, right? all these things, it's free to do all that. And yet it creates such resilience in terms of COVID comes along. There's a hiccup in the stock market. Somebody shoots a nuke, a meteor hits, a hurricane comes through, whatever it is. The resilience to be able to respond to that with equanimity is priceless. That's priceless. Rather than being thrown off base by every little thing that happens. Oh, my kid missed his lunch today, right? So I think this is something that everybody can work on, is managing stress, for sure. And then I think, getting a regular routine of exercise and movement, right? We've heard this from many guests, but you have to have that. And, you've heard me say before, and I'll say it again, I think it's really important not to have to wake up in the morning and decide whether or not you're going to exercise today. I think removing the decision from these things is critical. And so, I just wake up and exercise every day. It doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter if I want to. I just go do something, right? And I may do more on something on a day when I feel energized, and I may do a bit less on a day when I feel like I'm recovering.
That's what I was about to ask. Yeah.
But I'm doing something every day. The sneakers go on every single day, right? And even if I'm traveling, getting up early, taking a flight, whatever, then I'm going up and down the stairs in the hotel. I'm doing something that scratches the itch that I'm getting in some physical activity.
Yeah.
So, I think that's really key, is to take those decisions out. And then the other reason that people succeed and people don't succeed is the environment that they reside in. So understanding that it's not just about you getting information and then trying to implement it. That will only take you so far. What's actually critical, and what Gladden Longevity is actually in the process of building out right now, is helping people build out the environment that they live in to be able to support the mission, right? So you have 4 environments that you live in. You live in your home, you live in your office, you have work travel, and you have vacation travel. Those are pretty much the 4 environments that we spend probably 99% of our time in. And if you conscientiously build out each of those environments to support the mission, where are the sneakers? What's in the refrigerator? How do I get to the gym? What do I do when it's raining? What do I do when it's cold? What am I going to, if you architect those things, then your chances of success go up exponentially. Whereas if you just have the idea of, I'm going to be healthy and I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and be healthy, that'll work for about 3 days, right? Until you have a bad night's sleep or, something happens, and then, the rails come off. Or you come off the rails. So it's super important to think about really architecting this sort of systematically for yourself.
This episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast is brought to you by H2 Molecular Hydrogen in the Gladden Longevity store.
Yeah, Steve, you've heard us talk about this numerous times on the podcast in terms of the benefits of H2 and hydrogen water. We love it. It's really the best way to balance your entire redox system. So it really protects you from free radical damage. I take it every time I get on a flight to protect me from radiation damage when I'm flying. And I use it to rejuvenate my brain in the afternoon. There's really 2 kinds of exercise. There's physical exercise, and taking H2 before or after that works great. But also there's mental exercise. And I find that the H2 will bring your brain back when you're tired in the afternoon. So I think it's like the perfect thing for longevity and for performance, quite honestly.
And I talked to you about this, that I found dropping 1 or 2 tablets in a glass of water right before bed. I've seen an overall bump in my deep sleep when I do so.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So if you click on the store tab when you visit GladdenLongevityShop.com and use the promo code podcast10, you'll get 10% off your order. And this code isn't only good for our H2 product, but it's also good for all the supplements we carry. So podcast 10 at the GladdenLongevityShop.com.
Yeah, one of the other things that I use it for routinely is when I'm about to go on a mountain bike ride. And I will say this, that if I go on a long mountain bike ride, I will take one prior, I'll take one during, and I'll take one after. And some of the Ironmen that we've worked with have said that when they're doing an Ironman, they'll take it 3 or 4 times throughout the race. And their comment is that it's like taking out the old battery and putting in a new one. It really rejuvenates your body's ability to perform when you're doing more extended athletic activity. So think about that too. If you want to go do a longer hike or whatever else, take it with you.
So GladdenLongevityShop.com, enter podcast 10 for 10% off your order.
H2 molecular hydrogen. It's low-hanging fruit on your quest to make 100 the new 30.
Ernie, let me ask you, in the 3.5 years that you've now been with Gladden Longevity, how has your health journey changed? What have you started implementing? What have you started doing? How have you shifted your schedule? That kind of stuff.
I think Dr. Gladden nailed it right in the head. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind when you asked the question was, the environment, and not just your environment, which is what do you have in the fridge or the pantry? If you have junk food, it's going to get eaten at some point, right? So just not even having it, but also, the people you surround yourself with. People I've seen do the best have that love and support, whether it's family or friends, they go on trips with their friends and it's just laughter and things like that. That's just so important for the people that are kind of isolated and don't have that close knit support group, I guess you can say, whether it's family or friends. It's a lot harder. It's just when you have support and love. And I think I've always been, people always say I laugh a lot, and like sometimes I laugh at inappropriate times, but I think
Don't we
it's
all?
better to laugh, than to not laugh. And that's just always been me. And I'm fortunate to have a very close family and a lot of really close friends. So I think that's kind of always, that's always just important. But I think for me, I'm like, when I look at photos of myself from when I left the ER, and I've never been overweight or anything like that. Like I've always been kind of scrawny, but like I look at my photos and I see like I was just puffy. You just look.
Yes.
You see it in your face, right? Just puffy and tired. And, I was, day, night, all over the place. And then you eat and, whatever's in the doctor's lounge at 1 a.m., drink coffee at 1 a.m. to stay awake or whatever. And even though I was kind of already into this world and taking my vitamins, when you're like running around, you have maybe 2 minutes to eat in a 12-hour shift. You eat whatever you can get in your mouth because you just are trying not to pass out, right?
Yeah.
And you're usually not drinking enough water, and then you go home and then you've got stuff at the house with the kids or whatever it is, and trying to make it to their game even though you haven't slept, blah, 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 right? So I think just getting on a normal circadian rhythm for me by far has been probably, number one, where I just sleep every night. I'm never doing an all-nighter, and I have, exposure to sunlight where, when you're on like a week-long stretch of night shifts, you literally you're purposely avoiding the sun because you don't want it to wake you up before you go home in the morning or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the importance of, sunlight, just a normal kind of sleep rhythm has been huge. And then of course, we've got these great machines and equipment here in our advanced performance center. So, being able to use those, and, I've gotten a sauna myself, just knowing the benefits of a sauna, and, it's like a different person, right? I played tennis all along when I could. Now I can play more regularly and consistently. And I've got that group of people I play with. So I get the exercise and the social aspect of it. So being able to coach my son's, teams, like where I couldn't commit to anything like that before. It's just, I'm like a different person. I feel 1,000 times better. So.
Cool. Yeah, very cool.
So is there anything else? What I want to do now is transition to the book, since we haven't really mentioned the book, talked about the book at all. We won't go in depth, but we'll kind of announce it to the listeners and then we'll bring in Shannon. So is there anything else you want to talk about before that?
Yeah, I just want to thank the listeners at some point.
Okay.
We'll
do that at the very, very end.
Okay.
So Dr. Gladden, we've talked about that you are writing a book, and it's out now for listeners if they want to go to Amazon. 100 is the new 30, How Playing the Symphony of Longevity Will Enable Us to Live Young for a Lifetime. And dude, I mean, I saw some Instagram posts that it was up in Times Square and you were there recording a video, and congratulations, my man, your first book.
Yeah.
The first of hopefully many. Many.
No, I can tell you there's another one in there behind it. Not sure what it is yet, and I'm not going to bite off on it right at this moment. But it is interesting to write a book. It's the first book that I've written, and the first one that you do is always harder, right? There's a process you're not familiar with. Now that I've gone through the entire journey, I can see the end from the beginning and kind of know how to bring it forward. But I think what I love about the book is that it's really a book that's dedicated to all the listeners, if you will. It's dedicated to each one of us, and a lot of it is, kind of goes through my own story, if you will. But then it really goes through the four circles that have become really kind of the pillars of Gladden Longevity, which is the life energy circle, longevity, the health, and the performance circles. And I go through each of those systematically for people. And I really try to give them a lot of scientific information in a very digestible way. And I've heard from people that are reading the book that they, quote unquote, love it, that it reads very easily, that they're really enjoying it, and that really kind of warms my heart. And I hope that it really gives many people a framework from which to work when they're starting to think about their own longevity and their own health and how they're going to stay young, if you will, and live young for a lifetime, because I really believe that's possible now. So yeah, it was a labor of love, quite honestly, and ultimately it was a love letter to my own family that have all passed at this point in time. So it was very sweet for me to write it and be thinking about them as I did that. Yeah.
Well, for listeners that want to check it out, it's currently available on Kindle, hardcover, and paperback. You can go to Amazon. And coming up soon, hopefully in the next month or so, I would assume, is the audiobook for those that are audiobook listeners. You recorded that here in Colorado Springs area with a former colleague of mine, Dave Samuel.
Yeah, that's right. I was there about 6 weeks ago and recorded it. So he's in the process of, collating that or editing it or whatever. And so that should be out, I think, in October, sometime in October, maybe the end of October. But so if you like audiobooks, it will be coming. I read it myself also. So whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But
no, it's good. It's good.
I kind of liked reading it. And I will say this, that I recorded it before the print edition came out, and I made quite a few edits in reading it aloud, because when you read something aloud, it's different than when you're just reading it, right? The sentence structure and some other things. Yeah. So I think the book actually became a better book for that. So everybody benefits from that if you like to read or if you want to listen to it.
All right. Well, we have one other guest that's been sitting in the wings waiting to join in with a big announcement. Shannon Loudon, who's now a part of the Gladden Longevity team. Yeah. Dr. Gladden, why don't you introduce Shannon?
Well, Shannon came to us really as Chief Growth Officer, and Shannon has a background in medical devices and sales and companies and testing and things like that. She worked in a number of companies that she'll tell you about, but she also is a certified health coach and has a real passion for health and longevity. And so we were super excited when she decided to come back into the workplace and was interested to work with us. So it's been really a pleasure to have her. Shannon, welcome.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome. It's really my pleasure to join everybody here today. As Dr. Gladden mentioned, integrative medicine, longevity, preventative medicine goes by lots of different names, but ultimately feeling your best and empowering others to feel their best has really been a lifelong passion for mine. So I've really found a natural fit and a natural family here in Gladden Longevity.
Cool.
Well, I know for a fact, Shannon, the calls that I have been a part of that you've been on, you're bringing some really good stuff to Gladden Longevity. So tell us a little bit about your story, where you came from, where you grew up, where you've been, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I'm a Cali girl born and raised, and I've always been a fan of warm weather. So spent a little jaunt over in Maui for about 10 years, living off the land and off the grid over there with my friends on the east side of Maui. And really, I try to stay as close to the earth as possible. All that being said, there definitely needs to be an ocean nearby. So I've spent really most of my career, I went to San Diego State University. I got my degree in nutrition, and I double majored in biology, and was going to go into becoming a physician assistant. And I was approached by a couple different business opportunities to get right into the sales side of things, and it just gravitated toward it. And so, as you know, Dr. Gladden mentioned, I've worked in a lot of different capacities, really with integrative minded companies that everything from nutrition into genetics into really laboratory testing, equipment, modalities, anything that is looking at how we can stay vital and really bring our best foot forward. And so with that, it's been a fun journey. I find myself now in Jupiter, Florida, which I didn't know that I would ever end up here. If you would have asked me that 5 years ago, if I would end up in Florida, I would have been a hard no. But you know, when COVID hit and we were looking for a change, and so we, packed up our stuff, took our trailer cross country, and found a nice little spot here in Jupiter. And that really opened up the doors for me to take a little bit more time, get my kids settled back into school here. And, when I opened back up into wanting to get back into the workforce, as Dr. Gladden mentioned, I'm a functional nutritionist and a national board certified health and wellness coach. I was looking for something that merged all of the experience that I've had. So, from the sales and marketing aspects, but also into my real passion is working with companies to bring that client voice to every conversation. And so really my goal here at Gladden Longevity is to take that genius of GL that sits within Dr. Gladden, within Dr. Navarro, within our staff, within the medical community at large, and make that more accessible to our listeners, to the clients, to really that person who is out there wanting to be a part of this movement, wanting to look at their health and their life differently. And they're just looking for people and a community to be supported in that. And that's really the goal of my role here.
And when it comes to that community, you have a big announcement that we've been working on, and we've been teasing the listeners that it's been coming, but we have a start date for Age Hackers.
Yay, we do. So the Age Hackers subscription model is launching in October, and we haven't gotten the exact date. I want to say that we're around the 15th is what we're shooting for right now. And what's really been exciting about this is coming in and looking at some of the footage that's never been released, some of these extended interviews, this bonus material, they're now going to be available. We're also opening up a community platform because we've heard from a lot of people that, hey, I really want to talk to other people in this space and get a nice dialogue going. And so with the Age Hacker subscription, that community is now going to be available. Also, listeners will be able to ask questions and give their ideas for upcoming episodes and really get their voice heard a little bit more. We wanted to make this a little bit more interactive. We are also going to be offering a quarterly webinar. And as Dr. Gladden mentioned, we focus on these circles that make up the foundation of everything we do at Gladden Longevity. So between life energy, the longevity, the health, and the performance circles, there's so much contained within them. So we're going to be helping to break that down into digestible pieces for people so they can really start seeing how all these circles interact to create that mosaic of ages and really give you that platform that we work in and the understanding and how you can live young for a lifetime.
So where are people going to be able to find that?
So we also just launched a new website. So if you haven't checked us out in a while, you can check out gladdenlongevity.com/podcast. And there is a nice big button right up top there to join the wait list. And we've got quite a wait list going right now. So yeah, people can jump right on, put your name in. And as soon as it launches, we're going to send you out a link to be a member and to become an age hacker.
So Shannon Loudon, thank you. And listeners, you are going to be hearing her again in the future. I promise that. Dr. Gladden, we need to close this with thanking the listeners, because without them, since my company, Right Turn Media, has taken over the production, we've been watching the download numbers, and it has just been consistently ticking up since we've been really consistent with putting out podcasts. And that's all the listeners. That's listeners sharing. That's listeners sharing with friends. That's listeners promoting it on their social media channels, that kind of stuff. And I want to say thank you. And I know you all do as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we started this podcast, one of the key thoughts I wanted to communicate was my appreciation and thanks to the audience, really, for listening, for learning, for engaging with us, for some of the things that you've purchased from the store and things like that. We like making good things available to you. Your feedback, it really is a community, and we're just so grateful that you're here. We're grateful when you spread this out to other people too, when you share the podcast, and a number of people have joined from listening to the podcast to actually come in and be clients. So we love that too. But really, we're doing this for you, quite honestly. And so we just want to thank you for engaging. And if there are things that you would like to see us doing more of, and part of what we're talking about with the webinars and things like that is to make it more interactive. But if there are topics you want us to talk about, things you want us to do, things that would make it more fun or more engaging for you, please let us know, because we're here. Really, this is a service for you, quite honestly. So,
anything from you too?
Yeah. Just adding on to that, like I said, where Gladden Longevity has gone, in the last few years, and just to see, not just the practice grow, but the podcast and the listenership, and how fun. It's just really fun when we have actually listeners that come in, as clients, and I heard that episode, or I'm already taking that, or I'm using that device. And it's just really fun. And they think it's, fun to like put a face to a voice that they hear on a podcast or whatever. I've only been on a couple of them, but it's just fun. Yeah.
And I would just add to that, I get the privilege of speaking with, potential clients in all sorts of different realms. And I'm always surprised. I was just speaking with a client the other day that she heard about us through her niece. And so, this is a generational piece, right? It's not just, a older clientele or younger clientele. There's really something for everybody here. And, we really want your voice to be heard. So as Dr. Gladden mentioned, we look forward to any feedback that you have. Our goal is just to make this better and more, not only just accessible, but the value in what we're bringing to the table, just up leveling that every day.
Well, I can say every time I'm forwarded a question that an audience member wants us to talk about, a suggestion or a question that they have, I add it to a list of articles that we find and topics that we want to cover in those question and answer sessions. And so please, listeners, thank you first off for listening. And two, if you have any questions, anything you want us to talk about, please let us know. Submit a question at the website, and we will add it to the list and eventually get to it on the podcast. So thank you all for this episode. Dr. Gladden, again, congratulations on episode 200. That's a good milestone. Yeah. I'm looking forward to doing a big celebration over episode 500.
Yeah, there you go. No, I appreciate your contribution to what we've been doing also, Steve. It's been a pleasure. So thanks for all of that. And so the audience, just think of this as a big love letter to you guys, really, just an ongoing love letter that we keep writing for you. So we love doing it. We hope you love receiving it. And let's all stay young for a lifetime.